Hello and welcome into your local election headquarters on KARK.com and Fox16.com. I am Mitch McCoy. We have an exciting. We are talking about what some would call the biggest race locally here in the natural state, and we're specifically talking about the 2nd Congressional District race from incumbent Republican Congressman French Hill.
My whole career has been mostly in business, but this is my third opportunity to serve the public in public service.
To State Senator Joyce Elliott on the Democratic side.
I was a teacher for 30 years. I saw things there that I thought could be done at the legislature to improve education and opportunity in our state.
Joyce Elliott, French Hill, right now for the next 40 minutes. And we are joined in now by State Senator Joyce Elliott, joining us in by Zoom today. Senator, thanks so much for joining us.
Well, I'm happy to be here. You're quite welcome, Mitch.
So it was funny because we were doing a mic check, and you said, "Okay, I'm Joyce Elliott. I'm here in Little Rock," and when you said it, I always think about the political ads when you're like, you know, I'm Joyce Elliott and I approve this message. Do you record those every time, or is it the same one?
Well, I record one every time I record a new message. Yeah, every time. Is it just once and you got it down, or like, okay, no, I'm going to redo that? Oh, no, usually it's more than once.
Okay.
Sometimes it's, it just depends on, whether or not I hit all the notes the way I need to hit the notes.
There you go.
Yeah.
There you go. Well, just a random question here as I was listening to the mic check. Tell us a little bit about yourself.
Well, I am, I'm a school teacher of 30 years. But prior to getting into any of that, I think it's important that people know that I grew up in Arkansas in a tiny little town of Willisville. It's a community, I guess would be more accurate, of 152 people. And that was at a time when we had schools that were segregated and then desegregated during the time I was in school. So I was a part of, along with my sister and 4 or 5 other families, I was a part of desegregating a school. My sister was the first African-American to graduate from that school. I was the second. And that was a pretty difficult time. And that's when I learned so many things about, how to get along with people, how to figure out ways to bring people together, because it was obviously a time when that wasn't necessarily encouraged. But it's something that has stayed with me as a memory of how important it is not to work for division, but to always put everything into making sure you can bring people together. And as a result of my experience at the school, integrating a school, that really kind of cemented my notion of wanting to be a teacher, because my experiences were not what they should be. I wanted to be the kind of teacher that I didn't have, especially after I started integrating a school. So I went to college and decided to teach. And as I was a teacher for 30 years, I saw things there that I thought could be done at the legislature to improve education and opportunity in our state. And so in the legislature, I was happy to work on those skills of unity and bringing people together across party lines. And, when we voted to start our pre-K program, for example, we had the premier pre-K program in the country. And that was a result of working together. And that's really important, because there are some chambers of commerce now who even recognize that a great economy really does begin, with pre-K. And from there, I went on to work in the legislature to expand Medicaid, and we were the first state in the South to do so. And that was certainly an act of bringing people together, because we could not have done it without, working across party lines. And so I was very proud that we did that and covered 300,000 more Arkansans in the state who did not have health care. And, most recently, we've been able to bring some tax relief to the middle class and those who are not yet in middle class that I was happy to be a part of. And, so the through line of my life has been public service, trying to help those who are clamoring to get into the middle class and those who are in the middle class. And I hope everybody does well. But we need to have an economy that works for everybody. Unlike, my opponent, I work for the tax breaks to benefit those who need it the most. not those who were at the top. So I've always been that person who remembers where she came from and remembers what it means to struggle. And I want to take those skills of collaboration and the skills of working across party lines and understanding that when we're all working together, our country is going to be better, our state's going to be better, and so will Congressional District 2.
Boy, you have the history to back you up. I want to talk about a poll that was released by Talk Business and Politics of Hendrix College, a survey of 698 voters in the 2nd Congressional District, showing a very close race here between you and incumbent French Hill. French Hill, 47.5%. We have you, Senator, at 46%. 6.5% don't know. Your reaction to that poll from September, and what are you doing to reach that 6.5%?
I tell you, Mitch, I am really very humbled to know how my work and my background really relate to the people in this district, because there was the assumption that this was going to be something impossible to do. So it just really encouraged me to just keep working hard to be the kind of representative that we need in Washington, that will remember the struggles that people are having and remember how we can be so much better by growing a world-class education system. That's resonating with people. And therefore, if we grow a world-class education system, our economy can be better, an economy that competes, anywhere in the world. So my interest has always been, the people's interest over corporate interest. And I think that of course has resonated with people. And that's part of the reason this race is so close, because people know who I am and who I stand with. I'm the person, who would work for a tax break, for the middle class, and my opponent works for, a tax break for those who are the most well-placed and the rich. I have fought for health care for everybody, while my opponent, French Hill, has voted at least 13 times to get rid of health care, in a time of the pandemic. And this is not representation for the people back here in the district, but it is great representation for the people on Wall Street and those people who are doing very well. And that is the reason, that it's not helping our folks back here in District 2. People have noticed that. And I think all of that put together is the reason I'm doing so well in the polls, and the reason I will keep working hard to earn people's trust and earn their vote.
Senator, if you have one word to describe this race in this specific election cycle, what would it be? I
guess service, because everything that we do is about serving the public and not serving ourselves. So this race is an opportunity for people to understand what it means to have a public servant, as opposed to somebody who's committed to self. That's been, as I indicated, public service has been the through line of my work and my life. And so people have an opportunity to choose somebody who's about, in me, public service, or my opponent, who's seemingly has been all about self-service.
Do you think this, do you think this election cycle is different than years past? Is this specific election different than your race here for state senator or previous elections?
Well, it's different from the state senate just because it covers a wider part of Arkansas, a larger part of Arkansas. But one thing that is true is that people recognize a good public servant, and I have been and still am a good public servant, as a state senator and a member of the House. And the other thing that's really different about it, it's a different time, that when we know that there are more and more people who are struggling, with COVID-19 being a part of our reality now, and with folks who are struggling with the economy, the timing is different. And also, I think it is very important, to recognize that if people know they're not getting what they should get, because there's so much divisiveness and in the midst of their struggles with the economy and just losing their jobs, the least we can do, the least anybody should do, is make sure we're at least trying to unify us so that we can come together and come out of COVID-19 with a stronger economy and come out of this with a more unity among us, because the more, we care about one another, that's not going to be legislated, but the more we care about one another, the better we're going to be able to do overall and have the kind of society and have somebody who's leading by example. That's going to matter and how we do going forward. So I am prepared to do that and not ever be that person who is taking advantage of the divisiveness and even amplifying it more. I'm still, in my heart of hearts, the 15-year-old girl who worked to bring people together and trying to desegregate a school. I have never lost that vision that we can be one if we have great leadership and we're willing to work for it.
You mentioned the economy, you mentioned COVID-19. We've kind of opened up that door.
Yes.
I'm interested in hearing your response or your answer to the stimulus relief. What is it going to take to get direct payments into the hands of Arkansans?
Well, the first thing we need to remember is who is it that needs the help. It is essential that we are prioritizing people over corporations. My opponent voted against the Truth Act, which was designed to make sure there was transparency in how that money was used, the CARES Act funds, how it was used and who got the money. And he oversaw, the dollars that went to Wall Street before they went to small businesses. And this is one thing we need to get right, next time around, because it's not the corporations who are suffering, it is the everyday people. And that will be my position in any other funding going forward. And we need another stimulus. People first. That is the most important thing to remember. If we do that, we will be well on the way to making sure we are getting back to an economy that makes sense for everybody.
What is your response to the state and federal level what is your response to state and federal response to the coronavirus?
Well, one of the things I think statewide, everything seemed to have gone well. We were thinking about this more carefully, but I think as the pressure mounted, we just needed to, I think the community needed to do more. And the notion that we started to politicize public health, I think, was a real mistake. We needed to listen to the experts more and follow the expert advice. The scientists had it right, I think, and they made a recommendation to us to do those three small things, of making sure the community is taking part. We're going to wear the mask, and we're going to socially distance, and engage in sanitation in a way that's going to protect everybody. And in the midst of all of this, some of our priorities were just wrong. My opponent voted to cut $2 billion from the National Institutes of Health during a pandemic. That's politicizing, a health crisis, and that is not the way to go. So if we're going to heal, we need to be sure we are doing what the scientists suggest that we should do. We don't have to do it blindly, but we certainly need to listen to it. And going forward, I think anything that we do we must listen to the experts, regardless of what I feel. I know I'm not a scientist. It is in my interest to work to help everybody, and that's the way we ought to see it for one another. Otherwise, I think we will continue to go around in a circle trying to act as if everything is normal. It's not normal. So when things are not normal, I think that asks something different from all of us, whether you are in politics or whether you are a person who is simply being a good citizen. And I think that's what's required of us.
Senator, whoever heads to Washington after Election Day, whether it be you or the Republican incumbent, French Hill, we know that education is going to be at the forefront, especially post-COVID-19. what has to happen in the classrooms as we start to transition out of this global health pandemic? It may take 6 months, it may take a year, it may take 2, but you guys are going to be right at the forefront of all of this.
Yes, I think it's we have to talk about what's going to have to happen in the classrooms, and outside of the classrooms. And the big thing that I hear so much about and that we've worked on for so long is rural broadband. And that's true in some areas that are not quite so rural as well. But we know we need to do a better job with making sure all kids are connected, making sure all families have the devices that they need, because I suspect coming out of this is not going to be a sudden transition to the classroom for everybody. So that broadband issue is still really important. It's also important even if you're at school, because there are schools, of course, who don't have the connections that they need. And out of this, it's an opportunity to build a world-class education system. And we can do this. We have seen the inequities exposed even more with COVID-19. So when we start rethinking, let's look at what do we need to do to make sure our kids have an opportunity to compete on a world stage. And there are some rethinking that we can do for Washington and the states to work together to rebuild our educational systems, because we can incentivize states. We can work with states to just ask the simple question: what do you need so that you can compete with, fill in the blank for the country? We have to do more than just be content with competing with states or around us, or even states right here in our country. We need somebody other than Betsy DeVos, who has a vision for the world and for a world-class education, and make sure that we are not working in silos all the time, because to build the kind of system that we need, we have to have great standards and a curriculum that's well aligned, and that will lead to a coherent type of education that we can all be proud of. And we know that with that kind of educational system, we can build the kind of economy that we want and need. The two are very connected.
Well, believe it or not, we are at that 15-minute mark, and I know that you have a busy schedule today. So any last words as we wrap up here?
Mitch, I just thank you for the opportunity to talk with you about this, and I encourage everybody to vote early. Make sure if you have ballots you need to get them in if you are voting by mail. But early voting starts October the 19th, and I encourage people to get out there and exercise that right. If you go to joyceelliott.vote, you can find all the information you need about voting and making sure you exercise your right.
State Senator Joyce Elliott, thank you very much.
Oh, thank you, Mitch. Bye-bye.
All right, we're shifting gears now to Congressman French Hill, the Republican incumbent in the 2nd Congressional District race. Congressman, it is good to have you along with us today.
Mitch, thanks for the invitations. I'm glad to have the chance to be with you.
Okay, so I asked the senator first, and I got to ask you too. We were doing mic checks earlier, and she was saying her name, and I'm sure maybe you do the same during your mic checks. She was saying, "I'm Joyce Elliott," and then I'm thinking, in my mind, all of the ads. I'm Joyce Elliott, or I'm French Hill. I approve this message. I have to ask, do you record that each time? Is it a different one, and how many times does it take?
A great question. Well, we do 2 or 3 different versions of it, and it's always amusing to hear your voice back in these radio and television advertising.
Those I always wait, because in some parts, those are always the most interesting parts of the campaign. Your messages right there at the very end, approving this message. So hopefully you approve the message and the interview today. Let's jump right into it. And for people who don't know, tell us a little bit about yourself.
Well, I grew up here in Little Rock. I'm a 9th generation Arkansan. My family's been here for a long, long time. I went to Forest Park Elementary and Henderson Junior High School here in Little Rock, and then went on to Catholic high school. I grew up Catholic and grew up going to Holy Souls Church and then Christ the King. And my dad went to Catholic high, so I was honored to go to the Catholic high school and learn from Father George Tribu, who was such a mentor to me. And And then we had our third generation. Our son Payne graduated from Catholic High as well. So we really are blessed by the involvement with that great school.
Well, an Arkansan at heart, and I think that that's always something to look at. I'm sure people look at that when they go to the polls about history, and what is the history engraved in each candidate who they want to send to Washington.
No doubt. I've spent 40 years in business. I've started a lot of businesses. I've helped start businesses, both as a venture capital person and as a commercial banker. I'm very proud of, at age 40, I left working for a local community bank here and helped start one called Delta Trust, which I sold before I went to Congress. And I really love that effort, the creativity of painting on an open campus, creating your own business model, hiring the people, creating a team, and it was so inspirational. And I still stay in touch with those great teammates that I built that business with and the customers that we were so fortunate to have. So really, Mitch, my whole career has been mostly in business, but this is my third opportunity to serve the public in public service. And I grew up with a desire for public service. I admired Winthrop Rockefeller when he ran for governor. I was just a kid then and did door hanging for him in the subdivisions in West Little Rock. And so in my 20s, I worked for the Senate Banking Committee for a senator from Texas, a guy named John Tower. And then in my early 30s, I worked for President H.W. Bush and worked at the Treasury Department and the White House for him. And those two experiences really shaped my view of the nobleness of public service, that we have to have people leave their home, leave their hearth, and go serve on the city council, in the General Assembly of their state, or in Congress. So George Bush, the elder, and John Tower were both inspirations to me in my public service. And so I've been honored for the last 5.5 years to serve the people of Central Arkansas in the People's House.
Well, Congressman, we're just a few weeks away from the election, November 3rd. I want to jump right into a story that we actually have on our website, KRK.com, Fox16.com. This story published about a month ago, and it talks about a Talk Business and Politics Hendrix College survey. Out of 698 voters in the 2nd Congressional District, it shows a very close running between you, sir, and the Democratic challenger, State Senator Joyce Elliott. It looks like from the survey that they found that you are leading at 47.5%, Senator Joyce Elliott 46%. 6.5% simply don't know yet. What are you doing to reach that 6.5%?
Yeah, such a great question. Our internal polls have me a more commanding lead than that. But taking your point, we all are reaching undecided voters. We're talking about the distinction between Senator Elliott's record and my record. My record is about pro-growth and opportunity, both for our veterans, for people coming out of high school, coming out of college. I've put a real emphasis on workforce development, more careers, more jobs, economic policies like lower regulatory costs, lower taxation burdens on small businesses and families, so that people keep more of their own money and can start a business and thrive. And in the pandemic, Mitch, I think a lot of people are concerned about the pandemic. How do we kill the virus, and how do we rebuild our economy? And that's something that I think my background as an entrepreneur and as a business development person can be most helpful for in Congress. Those economic policies to rebuild our economy. And that's the track record that I've had since I've served in the House.
Well, and you opened up that door to the economy, talking about your track record. I want to get to that in just a moment, especially when it comes to COVID-19. But this race in particular, do you have one word to describe this election cycle or this race with Senator Joyce Elliott?
Well, I think there's a lot of uncertainty in the election cycle across the country due to the pandemic. That's a real issue. The number one issue facing voters is getting back to their life. They want to restore the health of the country. They want to rebuild our economy. And so uncertainty is a key issue. I think between Senator Elliott and myself, the real issue is who is the better leader to rebuild that economy renew the faith in the country, restore our way of life. And that's something that I think my track record speaks to. And that's something I've done my whole business career.
So you would say that this election is different than elections in years past simply because of COVID?
I think the pandemic has made it a more challenging election to get out and see people. The only parade I got to participate in this year is the Pangburn 4th of July parade. And I used to spend time at state fairs and all the parades across the 7 counties of the 2nd Congressional District, meeting voters and seeing them face to face. And there's been less of that in this election season. So a lot of it's been done digitally and, of course, reaching out through direct mail and other means.
So you're getting the Zoom minutes in, right?
The Zoom minutes are in. We're all logging our Zoom time.
There we go. Okay, so we were talking a little bit about, you had mentioned your track record, especially when it comes to the economy. And I think that we had even talked in recent interviews about a stimulus relief package. Even since that last interview more than a month ago, still no direct payments. What is it going to take to get money from the government into the hands of Arkansans, and what can we expect out of Washington?
Yeah, well, Mitch, this has been very frustrating since we last visited. In July, we thought we could move in late July to a tailored package that would get support in the Senate and support in the House and be signed into law by President Trump that had some core features. Number one, flexibility for our governors of the billions of dollars that we've already given to state and local government so that they could spend that on broadband, spend that to help businesses that are struggling. Number two, that we fix the concern about the unemployment compensation system. How much per week and how long would that service last? How do we support our states in unemployment? Thirdly, extend the Paycheck Protection Program, which has been a huge success. 40,000 businesses in Arkansas benefited, over $3 billion. And it really saved across the country, we estimate 51 million jobs over the course of the summer. There's $135 billion in that account that's unspent. And so extending the Paycheck Protection Program and let businesses like restaurants and hospitality companies still struggling get another access to the Paycheck Protection Program. And then finally, make sure that our education institutions have flexibility in the money they need to make sure our schools can open safely, and that even if kids are learning virtually, that they have the resources they need to do that. To me, those are the key components. And you said, how do we get there? Well, President Trump's in favor of that. In fact, he wants to also add another round of economic impact payments, the $1,200 per family, $500 per child. He wants to add that to the mix. And we have some consensus to move a bill like that in the Senate, but Speaker Pelosi keeps asking for, at first, $3.5 trillion. That's more than we even passed back in April. Then she brought it down to $2.5 trillion, and she has a lot of priorities that are not even pandemic related. So the speaker has not gotten on the same page with the senators or with President Trump, and that's held up this relief that our families sorely need, particularly our small businesses.
So, Congressman, what would you say to the individuals who are saying we need help now, and Washington is doing what Washington is doing, and it's playing politics? What would you say to those folks?
And just last week, 23 Democrats in Nancy Pelosi's own political party wrote her a letter saying she was wrong, she had the wrong strategy, she was not helping families, she was not helping small businesses. And they are voted with the Republicans to move forward this PPP extension and some of these tailored approaches. So the speaker has challenges in her own party, and I think it reinforces, Mitch, a terrible stereotype about Washington, that they talk, but they don't do anything. And this is why I outlined those key components that both Democrats and Republicans support. And I know President Trump would sign that bill into law, but it's being held up by the speaker's demands for even a larger bill. We could always come back after the election and do something else if it's warranted to help our economic recovery.
Well, depending on which aisle you sit on, you might have a different response to how the state and the federal governments have responded to the global health pandemic. What is your response on how the state and federal government has responded? And do you think anything should be different now that we're looking back on several months here in the middle of COVID-19?
Yeah, that's such a good question, because if we knew in early March what we know now, we could have designed the attack of the virus and the protection of the economy very differently. And we probably would have saved trillions of dollars of economic loss, because we would have known how to go about our business, protect each other, follow the CDC standards, but we wouldn't have shut down, for example, all elective surgery in our healthcare system. I think shutting down nationwide our elective surgeries, our healthcare for people who needed to see their doctor and were afraid to do it, were prohibited from doing it in some states, probably cost our economy over $1 trillion. So I think we could have done things differently. But look, we didn't know differently. It's a novel coronavirus. And the president, the vice president, each of our governors working with their public health departments tried to respond as effectively as they could. Congress took an unprecedented step by spending $3 trillion to help. That's 3/4 that we spend in a whole year for the whole federal government. That's number one. And the Federal Reserve jumped in immediately to provide liquidity. So I don't criticize the fact that the federal government responded as quickly as they could. So in the state response, that's why I'm not critical of either the federal government or the state governments, because they were doing the best they could with the uncertain information we have about this novel coronavirus. Here in Arkansas, by not shutting down completely, we were able to keep more people employed. We used the PPP funds, we used the state funds creatively, and therefore our tax revenues were up about 15% year over year the 1st of August, compared to Texas and California that had, Texas, New York and California that had severe shortfalls in their revenues. And yet we have about the same cases of coronavirus per 100,000 people, about 2,000. So if you shut down your state like Pennsylvania did, for example, or California or New York, you didn't really prevent the spread of the virus. The virus is going to do what it's going to do, but you severely hurt your economic performance of your state. So I'm grateful for the legislature and the governor here to use prudence and try to be careful about the CDC standards, but leave as much of the state functioning as he thought prudent.
You know, whoever is elected here come November, this person is going to have a massive responsibility on post-COVID-19, right? So we're talking the economy, we're talking jobs, we're talking education. Let's talk a little bit about the economy and jobs. What can we see from whoever's going to be elected, specifically from your perspective, since you're the Republican incumbent? What will you do to help get the economy back on track and get jobs here in Arkansas post-COVID-19?
Well, yeah, thank you. Well, we've clawed back about 50% of the jobs that we lost nationwide in April. We've created about 11 million new jobs recently. That's why I support the COVID practices that we talked about earlier as the PPP. What we need to do in the coming weeks, though, is make sure that we don't create an environment of high taxes and new high burdensome regulations that will make starting those businesses and getting people back to work even harder. And unfortunately, that's what the Biden-Harris proposal is. Joe Biden says his first thing he's going to do if elected is raise $4 trillion in new taxes. 82% of Arkansas families, American families, would pay higher taxes under the Biden approach. And he wants to increase the regulatory burdens across the country and new regulatory mandates in the way that President Obama did. So I don't think that's the right way to get the economy back. Secondly, I think we should extend the family tax credits that we have. I think we should extend opportunity zones for our low-income neighborhoods to get more capital. I think we should continue to invest in workforce programs to get people retrained in case they need to find a new career. And I've been very active in that as the chairman with my friend Brenda Lawrence of Detroit of the Skilled American Workforce Caucus, where we're showing how apprenticeships and workforce programs can be improved in K through 12 education, community colleges, and college to get more people back to work. We'll want to invest in those programs to enhance the economic recovery.
What about the classrooms? What's the plan with classrooms post-COVID-19?
Yeah, this is something we're learning a lot about, telemedicine and teleeducation. And as we have seen in the pandemic, people are coping with this. And in both instances, we want to make sure we're doing broadband investing. Governor Hutchinson has led the way, as well as the legislature under Senator Missy Irvin, for example. They've done a great job in extending ways to get broadband across our state, particularly for the 200,000 Arkansans that don't even have access to broadband. So this is why the CARES Act funding, I want to be made more flexible. And Chuck Grassley over in the Senate has a bill to do exactly that. Our governors could spend CARES Act money for broadband deployment and have the ability to spend it all of next fiscal year, 90 days into the following fiscal year. That would help Governor Hutchinson help our educators and our healthcare professionals make sure their patients and their students have access to broadband at home and in the school, because we want Mitch to have the capability as we go back out into society and open the economy back up. We want to be able to pivot safely, virtually, for both medical care and education. So I think you're going to see a lot of innovation in healthcare and education in the years ahead, and Congress will have a role in enhancing that by not over-regulating it, perhaps some creativity in grant programs, and encouraging those broadband investments across our country, particularly in rural states like Arkansas.
Well, we have about less than a minute left. Congressman, any final words as we wrap up?
Well, first of all, I want to appreciate the chance to be on with you and ask friends and constituents across the 7 counties of Central Arkansas to support me for my reelection. It's my honor to serve all the citizens of Central Arkansas, and I've done that for veterans, for our historically Black colleges and universities, for our low-income neighborhoods, and for our business entrepreneurs. My work as a former chamber chair, a community banker, I think fully prepare me to lead that economic regrowth of the American business community as we come out of this pandemic. And I support common sense ideas on both sides of the aisle to get that done.
Congressman, thank you so much. We appreciate it. I know that we will, I'm sure, be talking here in the coming weeks with both you and Senator Joyce Elliott. So thank you very much. I appreciate it. You have been watching live coverage of over the last 40 minutes or so from Congressman French Hill and State Senator Joyce Elliott as we talk about the 2nd Congressional District race. Of course, we'll have much more on this story as it continues to develop. KRK.com, Fox16.com, your local election headquarters for everything leading up to the big election day. For now, I'm Mitch McCoy. Take care.